Have you found yourself wondering, is there something more? If so, then you, my friend, are a dreamer in waiting. I'd like to welcome you to the Dream On podcast. I'm Julia Gentry, and along with my husband, Travis Gentry, we discuss real, raw, and not small talk conversations about faith, family, entrepreneurship, and all the things that matter most in this life in order to help people bridge the gap between what they currently have and what they really want most. Join us as we give you insights, tools, and strategy to chase every dream that's on the inside of you. But be forewarned, this podcast is not for the faint of heart, but rather those of heart. This is the Dream On podcast.
Welcome back to the Dream On podcast. I am Travis Gentry with Julia Gentry. And today we're going to crush this episode.
Let's crush it. Let's crush it. Because, behind the scenes, what you don't know is it's taken us 17 takes to get to this part.
Hasn't been 17. It's been 2.5.
Feels like 17. It's so true about life, though, when you really get going doing something and you fail 2 times. And why does it feel like 17?
Because it's been a long day already.
Oh, man. And it's only recording time. It's only 2:30. So it's
3. But yeah.
Okay.
Who's counting?
Actually, this is a really, really powerful topic today. So buckle up your seatbelts because we're going to dive right in.
Yeah, what are we talking about?
We're going to talk about how to master your mind.
Wow. Mind blow.
Yeah, because this is what my husband says. If I could coin him, and if anyone decides to, share this episode or repost it or subscribe or like or do all the things, you're going to want to quote him because his infamous age-old wisdom says, master your mind, master your life. And so that's what we're going to talk about today.
And I may have stole that from someone else.
Oh,
I don't know.
Sometimes you say things though that I'm like, has someone said that? Because that's amazing. So, food, side note, hyperlink that to if you ever find someone else said it before him,
then it's them, not me.
The credit. But if not, it's Travis Gentry.
But that's what you're supposed to do ultimately.
Yeah.
Is you borrow things from other people that are further ahead than you. And that's exactly what we're talking about today as far as mastering your mind, which you master your life through mastering your mind because it starts up in your head. It's all in your head first. Which
is so funny because I guarantee you that there's one of 2 thought processes, no pun intended. Actually, puns intended. There's 2 mindsets already. Hearing this right out of the gate is that either one, someone's sitting there going, oh my gosh, if I hear one more thing about mindset is king and mindset this and mindset that, and already you're ready to turn off the episode. Please don't. Just bear with us here.
Or do, because you're going to waste your time.
No. Or the second person is like, I don't see the connection between mindset mastery and life mastery, right? It's the person that's going, no, I'm just trying to keep up with life. Have you listened to the news? Do you understand the economy? Do you understand what's going on in my world? You must not be in reality, Gentrys, because my reality says something very different than just having a nice thought to make me feel good.
Yeah. And I say turn it off with the respect of, if you're going to have a closed mind, then we're not going to do anything or say anything to help you open your mind.
Yeah, you have to decide.
You have to decide that right now. And you have to take that, and there again, everywhere, in anything that you do, any situation, any circumstance, if you can look at it and say, okay, what can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? As opposed to, I'm the victim, it happened to me, poor me, once again, then you stop growing in that moment. And you're probably going to experience it multiple times because there's something in that experience that you need to learn to get to the next growth.
100%. So I think that good news is no matter where you're at in your mindset overhaul process, our hope today is to give you some inside scoop into how we've rethought this. And really this is going to be a multi-part series where we unpack not only the concept of mastering our mind and what does that mean, and you sharing your thoughts and me sharing my thoughts, but we also over the next couple of episodes are going to dive into how we master our minds so that we can have financial resilience. We're going to talk about mastering your mind so we can actually approach this from a parenting perspective. So this is going to be a series.
Yes.
Let's do this.
Let's do this.
Okay, so let's dive in because I'd love to hear from you. When did when did the idea of mastering your mind, mindset, right, thinking better thoughts, any of that, when did that go from head to heart from you? Like, it wasn't just a nice concept or successful people do it or another video that you could watch on YouTube. When did it like actually click for you and it became a way of life?
I'm going to go back, and I've said it multiple times, and I'll continue to say it. Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Poor Dad book. T. Harv Eker, the Millionaire Mind book. It helped me to even think that there's a different way of thinking.
Yeah.
And through that comes like growth and taking myself on of like, okay, I'm not in the environment, or I didn't grow up in the family that they talk about in these books, but what can I do? What can I learn? How can I be better to get to where they talk about in some of these books of these people, what they've accomplished, financially, but even physically. So then I started to take that over into every area of my life. How do I have the marriage that I want? What the marriage that I saw growing up was good, but like with my parents.
Yeah.
But how do I have an even better marriage?
Yeah.
Or a friendship, or raising kids? I was raised this way. It wasn't bad. But how do I be the best dad that I possibly can? Yeah.
And so my question to that though is, I think that what a person like me would do is that I'm ready to go, okay, great. Tell me the 1, 2, 3 step guide, right? Like, I'm ready to take action. I'm ready to do it. And at what level, like, what's that fine line between mindset and skill set, right? Like, what's the 1, 2, 3 step guide? And what is the, like, no, deal with your mind, deal with your head trash, deal with your heart trash, like, deal with the things that you need to deal with. Like, when did you realize that, oh man, this is not just a skill set, this is a mindset here?
Well, ultimately, you have a thought. Like when you read something, or you go to a workshop and you're learning about something. I'll give you my own example about real estate.
Yeah.
And you hear about what they're talking about and what they've accomplished. You have a thought that pops in your head. And you can either cultivate that thought, and it could potentially not be the right thought, and it brings you down, well, I can't have that, I'm not good enough, I can't afford that, I don't even know where to start, all the things. Or you can say, okay, I'm not where I want to be, but how do I get to where they're at? So then you say, okay, they obviously started off somewhere, and so how do I start to go down that path to get the knowledge, get the strength, get the wisdom, surround myself with people that are further ahead than I am. And so that was the process for me of like just understanding, like, there's people out there, there's books, there's workshops out there that will help me to reprogram like what's going on in my head. Because obviously if I don't have what I want in my life, I don't have the right tools. I don't have the right thoughts. And so to reprogram those thoughts of like, okay, fear and lack or scarcity or whatever thought comes up when there's something I want to accomplish, what is a new thought that I can replace that with? But then the hard part sometimes is like, how do I get that thought? And I think that's what you're asking. Like, well, it's like you have to go to seek that thought out because there's a lot of different thoughts on the other side too. And then you have to identify, okay, what fits and resonates with me that I can start to adapt and take on as my own and a new thought to help me. Is it going to be my thought that I'm going to have in a year or 5 years? Potentially not. Because when we started out into real estate, doing a deal and was a huge deal. Doing a deal and making $1,000 was a huge deal. And then making $10,000 was a huge deal. And then making $50,000 was a big deal. And then $100,000 was a big deal. So you progress, and just like physically working out, you progress. And so you've got to learn the tactics and the techniques to understand mentally, like, how do I handle this?
Well, I think even that example of going from the mindset of someone who is stoked about 1,000 versus 10 versus 50 versus 100. I think what's interesting and what oftentimes stops us is that, number one, we don't even realize that we have these negative thoughts, right? Like, oh, I'll never be enough. I'll never have enough. Like, we don't even realize that, like, we're captive to our own thoughts. So that would, in theory, be kind of step one. Like, do an awareness check on, like, what am I thinking? Think about what you're thinking about, right? But then I think what's interesting is then some of us try to like jump the gap to start thinking like that $100,000 person when all we feel is the fraud in between. You know, it's almost like the imposter syndrome, because I personally believe that now all of a sudden I'm trying to think thoughts that my internal belief system about myself hasn't shifted at all, right? So I have a poverty mindset and mentality, and already now I'm trying to have the $1 million mentality, but I haven't even earned $1,000 mentality. You know, I don't even have the mentality to understand like how to save money for a rainy day, you know? And so then what happens is it feels like we jump the gap. We go to the like, let's have the $1 million mindset, which I'm not suggesting you don't get there, but then we wonder why we're still making decisions based upon scarcity. You know, when I feel like there's a little bit of like a process, like a continual process of renewing your mind, of like checking it at each checkpoint along the way to go, okay, great, I probably need a different mindset to this phase, and now that one's not really serving me anymore. I'm going to probably need to upgrade that again to like stay there.
And I think you said it, maybe it's in the book or we've talked about it a lot, where you act your way into a new way of thinking. And so you have to be around people though that have been there. That's what really helps me, like in giving my own example of real estate, like being around someone that's already done what we want to do helps tremendously. Because you can walk alongside them to gain the strength and the knowledge, and someone to kind of lean on when you're having a conversation with a seller and saying, hey, we're going to buy your house. It's a $230,000 house, but yet I'm renting and my rent is, you know, $500 a month. You know, like that's mind blowing. Of course you can't go out there confidently and say you're going to buy this house because you don't own a house and you rent and you have $50 to your name.
Well, and you know what I think is so interesting? So if we actually use that as an exercise and we surround ourselves with people who have something in a certain area of our lives that we want more, a healthy marriage, financial resilience, a successful business, whatever it is that we're in pursuit of, what I find interesting, because where I think I started out, like if I look back at our journey in real estate and business coaching, and then some of our epic fails, you know, in intern company and right, all the different land processes that we've done with, I mean, we've just done so many things. I was after, tell me what they do to be successful, which isn't bad, right? I was very much, I wanted the plan, I wanted the process map, I wanted all of those things. But what I didn't start doing that now I find myself encouraging other people to do is I want to know, what do they think about that process? How do they think about money? How do they think about their marriage? How do they think about God? Because obviously it's not just what they're doing that is impactful, it's how they think about what they're doing that is impactful. And for me, it's when I decided to go, if I can understand how they think about that, then in theory, my activity should be a byproduct of a changed thought process. You know what I mean? Like, okay, if they think that, well, here's how I think about marriage, here's how I think about money, and I go, okay, it's not what I was originally thinking, but that could probably serve me, then that thought will actually stimulate aligned activity.
Yeah.
And that's been huge for me because again, I think you and I both are, but I'm an activity girl. I like to do things to the point that even Travis will go, did you think about that? I'm like, oh, that's a tricky question there. Cause no, you know, but I'm going so fast. And I'm like, I have had to start to be resilient in my mindset, now asking a totally different question, not just what do I need to do here, but how do I need to think about this here?
Yeah, and you tend to be like failing forward. I tend to want to analyze it probably too much at sometimes. I still take action. It's probably more controlled than you, but I think that's what's worked for us over the years of like, one, we challenge each other to say, like, there's at some point, like, you gotta take action. So I remember being at a real estate conference, and it's so exciting when you first get into it and you print business cards and flyers and do all the things, but then you don't hand them out, like you're undercover. So there's a point where it's like, yes, preparation is important, but it's also the action, which is going to give you the actual experience that you need. It's like saying how to ride a bike to someone for hours and hours and hours. At some point, you've got to ride the bike to understand how it feels and, you know, your equilibrium. And so same thing with this of through the new thoughts that you have, you have to start to take action, and that's where that action leads into a new way of thinking, because then it gains some momentum and strength mentally. And that's where it helps, going back to being around someone or a community that is moving forward, because what I've experienced and what I've seen is that when you're around, and it typically, unfortunately, your friends and your family, the ones that love you the most, are typically the ones that tend to hold you back more often than not, because they're scared, or they had one experience and it didn't work out. Yeah. And so whatever you're trying that you're excited about, they tend to poke holes in it, as opposed to like say, oh, I tried these few things, it didn't really work, but try this, or, you know, like, you can do it.
Yeah. Well, and I think the ability to have this kind of mental resilience is also watching like the edges. And I don't know why, but this has become so apparent to me watching the kids learn something new in school. And it's felt more real for me, because I think what we find ourselves doing is these universal always and never, you know, like I'm sitting down with Nixon here. He's this little guy's in kindergarten and he's learning his letters, right? And he there's some days, I don't know what it is, but he just crushes it, knows every single one, every single sound. And the next day you're like, have I taught you nothing? You know, like, but he sits down the other day and the first thing out of his mouth is, I will never get this right. And everything in me, like, I wasn't mad at him, but like that, I was like, I will kill that mindset. You know, like, okay, wait a minute. Like,
we're not bringing that forward.
Yeah, and so it was so interesting, because what I also didn't want to do is swing it to the other side and say, oh, baby, you're always going to get it right.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think we have to be so careful at this pendulum swings. I'm never going to have what I want to. I can have anything I've ever dreamed of. Like, I think we have to be really careful in those, because what we're trying to do is to develop, how do I want to say, we want no expectations with high standards, right? Because if I have this expectation and I'm trying to create this like magical world by saying I can have whatever I want and I believe in myself and I can achieve great things and all these things, that's awesome. But what's happening is that I'm actually not developing a standard around, wait a minute, it's not just about skill or production or manifestation. It's about really truly understanding who I am and what I bring to this world. Not perfect, not having it all together, but recognizing my strengths in some of it. And so I can have a high standard for myself in this situation. I can have a thought process that has high standards for my marriage, for my life, for my career, for my parenting, without being attached to the expectation. Does that make sense?
Because it brings disappointment.
So like if I were to say, okay, I have a standard for our marriage, which we talk about, but it's a good example. I have which is passion and connection. I could really start to spin if I don't show up the right way, you don't show up the right way. Like, I have this expectation that tonight's going to be incredible, and then it's not, and you're tired and I'm tired and the kids are doing all the things, and I could just spiral. Why? Because I have an expectation, and though I'm like, well, I'm trying to think positive thoughts. No, I have an expectation here. My standard, my mindset is, no, I have a marriage that's connected and passionate. Always. Period. And so I think it's also learning the art of this, of not having these big pendulum swing mindsets, but also really understanding what is my standard here that I can live into and detach from the expectations of what's going on around me, so I can just keep living into it, whether I see it right away or not.
Yeah. I mean, it's so elementary and basic of being okay with where you're at, having a goal and a vision of where you want to go, but don't put that as your standard for next week.
So fair. We have so much to unpack in that statement. Are you talking to me?
Every master was once a disaster.
Preach.
And so I think it comes back to, and we were talking about it today, you know, as I start kind of this new, season, but just adding one more tool to what I'm doing as far as investing. And I'm day trading and swing trading and investing kind of, you know, a little bit longer term too, based off of market cycles and macroeconomics and like where we're at. And I'm trying to wrap my head and drinking out of a fire hose, and I see these people that now have become like my mentors, and I'm like, I know I can do that, but I'm not there.
Yeah.
And some of them are younger than me. Totally. And you're like, well, I could judge that, and you know, I should be further ahead, and I should know this already, and all the things that come along with that. But no, I sit back, and every morning I've taken some time of like just being present, praying, and understanding, okay, here's where I'm at, here's the goals that I want to accomplish.
Yeah.
And it may take longer than I want it to, but knowing I'm laying a foundation, because what I see some of these guys have accomplished and are accomplishing right now, I know I can do that too.
For sure.
But I don't have the knowledge base, but mentally I'm not there yet.
Yeah. Well, I think you're just saying two really important things, and all of us could call it something different, but and this was the point that I wanted us to lean in a little bit, is I think part of what we don't understand is that where and how we develop mental resiliency, right, is in those moments, right, where I can honestly start to hear you lean into this idea of I can have what I want, right? Like I can have what I want and build the business that I want and have the financial freedom that I want, and I'm not yet quite there yet, but I'm going to be making decisions based upon I can have what I want today. So even though I can't see it today, even though I don't feel it today, even though I don't feel like it today, the mindset is built, like the resilience is built in the times that you can't see it, not just the times that you can. And I think that that's what makes this so tricky about this, like, you know, just this juxtaposition of learning how to master your mind. Is you master your mind, I think, in the valleys. You master your mind when it's the hardest.
Yeah.
You know, you master your mind when it seems to be dark everywhere, even though yesterday God was like, you're going to be the brightest light to this whole world. And then you wake up and it's dark and you're like, this isn't working. You know, and then you're like, no, go back. I mean, that's even why the Bible says, do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. What does that mean? It means that in the darkest of times, I actually have to go back to the word that I had, to the dream that I had, to that idea of, no, I can have what I want. And I'm going to build the mindset in the valley. And I think that sometimes, again, that mindset game doesn't really talk about that. They talk about put it on your fridge, say it 1,000,000 times, write it 1,000 times, say it even when you don't feel. I'm not saying, I don't want to like say that all that didn't work. It just didn't work for me. Because there was a huge part that was like, I don't buy it. Because I wasn't actually looking at that. The testing was leading me. Like the testing was developing the resilience of a mindset that goes, what do I believe? What will I choose to believe?
I think humility plays a huge part in it, because at some point you get to an age, through my own experience, you get to an age where you think you should know more than you know. And I've come to the realization I don't know a whole lot. And so I'm on this journey to gain knowledge from other people. And I was just listening to something today, and it was fascinating, because it's like, how often do you go to a networking event, or you go somewhere and you talk 80% of the time as opposed to listening 80% of the time? Like, you know what you know, but it brings humility of like listening and asking questions. Maybe you already know what they know, but maybe they know someone you need to know, or they have some kind of resource or tool, or just one nugget, like one thing that could change your life. But it brings, for me, it's like, and I've been there, where you go into someone, you're like, you walk out and you're like, that felt awful, because I just talked the whole time, and I talked about all the things that I knew and know, but it was like I didn't create space to ask questions and be like humble in the moment of like, I don't know what I don't know, and so I need to ask more questions than talk. Totally.
And it's funny that you're using that word, because I think for all of us, I think that there's moments that God drops a different word that's like, run with this. You know, because like my word that started to change this was surrender. Because I think I was still trying to force my way through this better mindset, right? Like I was pushing harder, because my thought was I should be stronger than this. So to your point, you said, I don't know a whole lot, right? I should know more than this. Mine is like, I should be stronger than this. And so I was pushing to the point where Florida, right? I end up in exhausted and adrenal fatigue and all the things. So I think my body was like, chill, you know, like chill out. And it was when I finally surrendered to, instead of like forcing myself upon it, it was like, let's just surrender to the truths that I know are truth and trust them. You know, because I think we hear a lot of these truths like, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, trust the Lord, right? Like we hear that, but then are we actually living that? And for me, I was like, nah, not really living that. Right?
And it's kind of that balance, and we've talked about that too, of like faith without works is dead.
For sure.
So you have to have faith, and you have to let God do what he does, and you've also got to put your hand to it.
Well, and here's what's interesting, because I think if we're looking at people in general, I think that we generally will do one without as much of the other. So we either have our faith people that are praying, and while they're praying, we got our active people that are doing, and the faith people are like, you're making me tired, and the action people are like, you're making me tired.
Do something about it.
And so I think it's this perfect dance of knowing, like, pray like it depends on God, act like it depends on me. And I found for me, I was acting like it depended on me. My mindset was developed around that. Like, my whole thought process was like, this just all depends on me, which is why I was completely burning out. And so I think that mindset is around humility and one of surrender.
What had to happen for you to like connect those pieces of like, what I'm doing is not working? Like, going back to your mindset of like, I'm going to do it, I'm going to work harder, and then you get more exhausted. I'm going to work harder. And then you're like, okay, this isn't working. At what point you're like, I got to change something.
I think it's when I mentally and emotionally and spiritually felt like I'm exhausted. Like, I don't have what it takes to do this. You said I'm kind of a fail forward. I don't think I hit rock bottom on paper, right? We're only talking like a year ago. It didn't look like that on paper, but I think I had come to the end of that mindset. So even to your point earlier of $1,000 mindset and $10,000 mindset, and I had come as far as that mindset would take me, which was get it, JG. And I did, right? Like, I look at the year after or before, we had traveled the country, we wrote the book, we had our 4th baby, we launched our podcast, like, we got it. And I think that mindset got me as far as it could. And the next, I remember truly the day I'm walking down our farm, not totally sure I want to still be living there at that point in time, feeling really exhausted, even though it's like 90 degrees and humid and it's hot and all the things. And I remember God going, my turn. And I was like, oh, that's just something that faith people say.
Or or convince themselves.
That's just something that those people with just too much faith and not enough doing actually say. And I really did. I was like, I'm so afraid to just trust you, God, because I've seen so many. I'm not trying to bash people that walk in high levels of faith. I'm just saying I had seen a lot of people who weren't doing anything. They were only praying. And it wasn't until I finally surrendered and I said, okay, God, I'm going to do what I can do, and I'm going to make room for you to do the rest. That was the key. I'm still going to do what I can do. I'm going to find my edge. I'm not going to push past it because I had been pushing past it. I'm going to find my edge. And then I'm going to let you, and I'm going to actually watch and make room for you to do the things that I can't do. And that was last year, right? It was one of my best years, not pushing over past my edge.
Yeah.
It was sustainable. So I think it was a shift in going, that mindset only got me so far.
Yeah, and now you're on this new
mindset.
And there again, this whole like episode is about like it never ends.
Yeah.
Fortunately and
this
unfortunately.
This episode will end.
Yeah, we're gonna talk all day long about this. No, but the whole mastering your mind.
Yeah.
Because once you get to something else, and I'm a big believer, like, and I forget, like once you stop growing, you're dead. Like, you have to continually grow and challenge yourself. That looks different depending on your age, where you're at in life, kids, no kids, spouse, no spouse, whatever that is. It looks different, feels different, and you should probably be pursuing things differently. Right now, you're on a new season and within your business of growth in a new way because you hired someone full-time and she's now coming alongside you to get you to where you want to go because you can't do it alone.
And here's what's so interesting. So anyone that's at a shift in mindset, I think this is so incredible because you'll know it because you start to kind of go back and forth, right? It's like doubt is not, I don't believe. Doubt is I'm undecided in what I believe. Right? Which is different than fear. Fear, already decided, I'm scared. Like, I'm freaking scared. Doubt is, I'm not sure what I believe. And I remember, this was a couple months ago, I remember a few mornings in a row that I could go, oh, what do I have to do here? Because I could sense myself going, this isn't going to work. I'm going to fail. I'm going to fail forward, but I'm going to hurt people. I can't trust anyone. All of a sudden, it was like, well, unless I could. Yeah. Like, what if I did trust people? What if I trusted God and me and Cammie and all of these people and it was this like, okay, what am I going to choose here? Because I could go with this and I could make all of my decisions based upon this. I could even call it realistic. I could even call it practical. I could really wrap this thing up and call it whatever I want to call it. Or I could learn the lesson of trust. I could create a mindset of trust. Yeah. Do I trust this? And how could I trust this? What does trust look like?
growth in general takes a level of like trust.
100%.
And so now that you hired someone, now giving some of the day-to-day, tasks to someone else to have them do it. I know, and you tend to like, I'll just do it.
Yeah.
So that in general is hard for you.
Yeah.
Of like, okay, like you got to the point you needed someone.
For sure.
But then now you're strengthening yourself, your mindset of like, I've got to trust this person or anybody to help me bring this message that you feel like God called you to bring to the world with the book and workbook and all the things. Yeah. And so now, what do you feel like is the greatest like lesson now that you're in the midst of it? Because we had multiple conversations about hiring someone part-time, full-time. And I think what we do a very good job in is doing a self-audit and a family audit of like, okay, if you take this risk, it's an educated risk. What are the potential pros and what are the potential cons? And if worst case happens, what does that look like? And so now that you're here, what is that kind of mindset that you're, because I think a lot of people, some people that may listen are entrepreneurs, and it's like that, you can only do so much. And so to get to that next level, you have to have someone else, whether it's a VA or a part-time person or a full-time person or a crew or whatever that is, you have to have more people. And I believe for the most part, God, if he put a dream inside you, it needs other people.
100%.
Not just you. Because then it's not a God-sized dream.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, I'll lean into trust. And I think that's how you actually start to shift your mindset as you start. I had to ask myself, what is the woman who's built the dream that I can see in my heart? Like I can see it. And this wasn't just my career. This was my family life too. This was our marriage. This was our family. This was all of the pieces of the whole puzzle. What does she know that I don't know yet today? What does she believe that I don't yet know? And it took me, probably a couple of weeks to figure it out. And that word trust, I didn't know I wasn't trusting. I was controlling everything. I was holding on to everything because in theory, right, we could go back to all of my past, but I can't trust it. I can't trust you. I can't trust it. I can't trust. And so I had built a world around me that required me. I was at the center of all of it, not because I was narcissistic, but because I was freaking afraid of being disappointed or let down. And so for me, even when I think about our au pair and I think about how we're growing this business and, you're going into things, I can't help you with what you're doing now because I don't even know how to spell half of what he's talking about. And all of a sudden I was like, and I think this is the other hard part because you're like, okay, I need to learn about trust. And then you realize all the areas that you don't trust. And then that opens up a whole can of worms because it's not just in this little piece of the pie of this part of my business. It's in every area.
Yeah.
So that's my mindset right now is what does trust mean? What does it look like? How do you build relationships in trust? How do you work towards trust? What is trust? What kind of boundaries do you set in trust? Like all of that. It's just opened up a whole new world.
Totally. And what I see with you too, and for both of us, because we've had, different partners or different people that we've collaborated with and some good and some bad. And you can look at that and say, that's baggage, or you can look at that and say, no, that's leverage because I have now the experience of the do's and don'ts.
For sure.
And so most people won't even get started by hiring someone. We've probably hired and stopped and done different things. I've done it with VAs and stuff. But every time I do it, I get better and better. And so there again, it's mastering my mind of like, that wasn't a failure. It was feedback. It gave me some information. And now I need to do it differently moving forward if I want a different result.
For sure.
Because obviously the way I did it wasn't exactly the outcome I was looking for.
Yeah. And I think ultimately that's where we'll land today. And we're going to unpack this in the series and kind of take this down different paths because I think that, right, there's a little bit of a different conversation when we're talking about money. There's a little bit of a different conversation when we're talking about kids. But I think the idea here is like, there is a part of really self-auditing and thinking about what you're thinking about and ultimately simply asking, is that thought going to get me to where I've never been, like where I want to be too? Like it could probably take you where you don't want to go as well. But the idea would be, oh, that's interesting. I'm aware of my thoughts. And is that thought actually going to get me to where I want to go? And then it just becomes a real simple answer. It's either a yes or it's a no, right? And then realizing that the valley in between is designed to actually build the resilience that you need to master your life because you've mastered your mind.
Yes, so good.
That loop.
So we are going to talk about a couple different topics. One of them is just kind of money and what used to work may not work moving forward going into 2023.
So you're not, that's what I need you to know. Buckle up, you're not going to want to miss that.
And so we're going to just throw out some different ideas and tools and tactics maybe that you can start to implement or learn about, and then figure out what works for you or may not work for you moving forward. But I could pretty much guarantee it's going to look different over the next 6 to 12 to 9 months, or 6 to 9 to 12 months.
Totally. Either way, backwards, forwards, all the ways, doesn't matter.
In between.
We're also going to be talking about just developing and mastering your mind from a parenting and a family perspective. As all of you know, Travis and I have upgraded to 5 children, and so we are going to just be sharing some of the things that we are doing and learning on really what I still, to the end of any sentence, will own the fact that of all the things that we've done, I'm most proud of how we've done marriage and how we've done parenting. So we won't pretend to know it all, but we will share just our tips and tricks on how we do that.
And how we do it the best that we possibly can with the information and where we're at, but always looking to grow, like as our children are, 9 weeks to 8 years old, it's going to look different in 2-4 years.
Yep.
But it's like we're continually growing and not just looking at where we're at, but where we're going.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to share with you too, is that what we've learned thus far, and then what we're also doing to prepare for kind of as they get older.
And then can I just give one more shameless plug?
Just one.
Okay, good. We're also launching our own mastermind groups. This has been a long time coming. Do you remember the first time that you actually told me to do that? Actually, don't answer that question. Okay. So we are launching our mastermind groups, which I'm going to put a link in the show notes. There is a video on YouTube. You'll be able to find this information and dive in. But we are going to be launching a year-long mastermind group where we will be putting 12 people in one group, talking about all of these things. So many of the principles from my book to the growth coaching that I do, we're now going to put them into a curriculum to where you, no matter where you are across the country, can join us as we dig into understanding conflict and how to do it better, talking about vision and how to clarify it, understanding your own limiting beliefs and the things that stop you. We're going to be talking about money. We're going to be talking about health. We're going to be talking about all of the things at a very deep, intentional level. And so we want to invite you to join that community. How'd I do?
Good.
Okay, that's my practice. So we are going to put the link, as I mentioned, and over the course of the next couple of episodes, we'll talk a little bit more about that and share some of the wins and the testimonials from the people in those groups. But
awesome.
Until next time.
Dream on.
Dream on.
On behalf of both of us, thank you for listening to another episode of Dream On. Don't forget to visit our website, The Dream Factory & Co., for all the show notes and other tools and resources to get you unstuck, clear, and helping you reprogram your thoughts and beliefs so that you can live out your dreams with a community that supports and challenges you. Until next time, dream on.